A rate cut is still a long way off, according to the Chief Economist of the Committee for Economic Development of Australia. I spoke to Cassandra Winzar for analysis of the economy's performance and business conditions. Welcome. Did Taylor Swift save Australia from a contraction?
So one of the positives that we saw out of today's GDP figures is that we have had a slight increase in household consumption growth. Some of that is through spending on essentials, so electricity and rent, but a lot of it has actually come through spending on entertainment. And certainly some of that is probably driven by Taylor Swift and her tour, as well as some of the other entertainment events that happened during the March quarter.
What does this story of near zero growth mean for business? We've seen a huge rise in imports, inventories are up, and new business investment is off.
So business conditions are really soft, and I think if you talk to people in the business community, that's probably not a surprise. So we're seeing the impacts of a lot of economic uncertainty and of rising interest rates on business activity, and that's why we're seeing this contraction in business activity, particularly around investment. And that has contributed to this very soft GDP figure. So we've just inched in with a little bit of growth at 0.1%. And it really shows the fine balance we've got at the moment between the RBA trying to take the heat out of the economy to get inflation down, but not shifting into a recession. And we're actually pretty close on balance.
Tax cuts and energy bill relief are coming. How will that influence business conditions for the rest of the year?
So look, it really depends on how much of that consumers spend and how much of them save. So we do think in the second half of the year, it will be the first time in a while that consumers have had an increase in their incomes. So if they're out spending, that should give some growth, boost to economic growth, some boost to business conditions. And we do expect to see that starting to come through in the next quarter, but probably the final quarter of the year as well.
You mentioned the challenge facing the RBA. Can it land the economy softly?
So at the moment, it actually seems like they're getting pretty close to that. So we are seeing inflation. It is still a bit higher than we'd like, so it's about 3.6%. That's above the 2 to 3% range. But it's coming down, slowly, but it's coming down. But it's going to be continually challenging for the RBA over coming months and quarters because it is that tricky balancing act. And if they go too hard, so if we see another interest rate hike, if it wasn't necessarily needed, that could really hit on economic growth.
What chance do you put a rate hike from the Reserve Bank?
Look, I don't expect to see any movement from the RBA this year unless we saw a really big change in conditions. I think the most likely outcome next year is that we will see a rate cut at some point, but the RBA governor is not ruling anything in or out. And if we see a material change in the outlook, particularly an increase in inflation, I think they will act, and they'll act pretty quickly.
Cassandra Winzar, thank you.
Thank you.